Welcome back. Did everybody have a good time in Lab 5 exploring various versions of humanity and ice cream? Yeah? Well, that is a really good review for the lab. Thank you so much. And welcome back. We are back with another really exciting panel where we're taking a step back toward innovation models, specifically asking the question of how do we build startups and how do we focus on early stage innovation in order to make it grow in great ways. To not dally too long, your lovely moderator is going to be Asumi Ota, who is a partner at Design for Ventures, where she co-manages operations, everything from sourcing, due diligence, all the way up to investments and so on. Her professional history has led her through various stages, including a business design lead position, where she has been nurturing a passion for helping Japanese startups grow with a human-centered focus. So if you don't mind, please allow us all to welcome Asumi Ota, who will introduce your panelists to you in this wonderful panel about rewriting the playbook, new models for early stage innovation.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for coming back to the conference room from the sunny day. It's a shame we had to come back while it's sun out there just yet. But I hope you're as excited as I am to be back here to hear from our panel on how they are changing the ways of early stage innovations. As she mentioned, I've been in and around a design firm called IDEO, where it was a pioneer in advocating for having people with diverse backgrounds and perspectives in one room to make innovation happen. And even then, I think healthcare and biotech remain some of the most challenging areas to openly collaborate and co-create because of data sensitivities, patient privacy, and regulatory restrictions. So, yet it's precisely these complex environments that new models of convergence and collaborations are urgently needed and most exciting to explore. And I think it's just right that we are having this conversation at OIST, where I just learned at the campus tour that professors from different backgrounds and departments are put together next to each other in order for collaborations to happen. So let's jump start and hear from our panels on how they are rewriting the playbook in this exciting yet challenging field. I'll let them introduce themselves, but we have Max Ventilla, who is a general partner and head of studio and product strategy at Offline Studio. And we have Philip Strandwitz. Is that right?
Close enough.
Okay, sorry. I practiced it, but I couldn't get it. Oh, sorry. Co-founder, director, chief executive officer from HoloBiome. And we have Koshu Kunii, who is a general partner at Lifetime Ventures. So Max, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I have been a serial entrepreneur over my career. I've started 4 venture-backed startups around AI, usually what you would think of as a platform for something, for education, for autonomous driving. And in between those startups led innovation for larger public companies. So for a media company in Europe, and then for Google, and then for Dropbox. And I really love kind of this early stage moment where there's nothing and then suddenly there's an idea and not much else, and then slowly the ball starts rolling down the hill. And usually it rolls off the hill, but sometimes it kind of gets far enough that people are able to have their lives really changed at scale. Have built 6 products that have over 100 million users today, 2 that have over 1 billion users today. I don't think I'll ever quite get to that scale again. And I'm really enjoying, as someone who's worked on AI, since the late 90s, being a practitioner again and actually getting to start new projects that I work on directly. I think this kind of moment of AI is tremendously fascinating, where these tools that were kind of at the end of our reach are starting to become more and more integrated with self. And I think there's a danger of continuing to build bad technology which actually makes humans worse at the things that really bring us joy and let us be present. And so I think this moment of asking kind of what is good technology and how do we create the cultures and platforms to have more, not less of it, is really what motivates me.
Hello, everyone. I've talked to many of you, but I'm Phil Strandwitz, CEO and co-founder of Holobiome. Holobiome is mining the gut microbiome to identify good bacteria in food to improve human health broadly. But one of the things I've come to appreciate in talking with some in the audience as well is maybe people don't know too much about the microbiome. So real quick on that note, when I use that phrase, microbiome, I'm talking about the trillions of microbes that live on and in all of us. The majority of your microbiome lives in your gut and consists of gut bacteria. And if you were to count them up, you have as many within you as there are stars in the Milky Way. So what I wanted to just share with you with that is you aren't just a human, you're an ecosystem. And as we think about the ecosystem that lives within us, the microbiome, this has been tied broadly to human health. This started with infectious disease, to immunological disorders, to neuroscience, to metabolic health, to longevity. And at first this was surprising, but the microbes are always here, we just grew around them. And what really brings hope, the last 20 years of this type of research, is can we fix the microbiome to help a lot of people? But one of the biggest challenges in this space is we simply do not have the tools to do that. And so if you think about your microbiome like these beautiful Japanese gardens that we've seen on our trip, the bacteria in your gut can be considered the plants and the food you eat, the fertilizer. What we do not have today, if the garden that we have cultivated over the years burns down, are tools to actually fix it if it's broken. So of the maybe 5,000 to 6,000 different types of microbial plants that live within humans, you can only buy 50 of them. This is exactly what Holobiome seeks to solve. So we built a platform biotech company to do this, which has 4 different components. The first is we get samples from around the world, so we can actually get the microbiome to our lab. The second is we built the most diverse collection of human gut bacteria in the world. The third is we're learning a lot about what these microbes do for human health as well as what they eat. And then the final part is we develop these with large corporate partners, and we have 4 of these right now. But I bring that up because to do that one thing, potentially improve human health by modulating the microbiome, we had to spend years building a platform. And I think there's tremendous opportunity when you invest in building something like this to collaborate, to bring the most use of it to the world. And so this is something that we think a lot about beyond our traditional model of biotech, where you build a platform, you find one thing, you fire the R&D team, and you advance that one thing. I think it's a broken way to do this business. And so I'm very excited to talk about that concept today.
Thank you. Koshu.
Good afternoon. My name is Koshu Kunii, currently general partner at Lifetime Ventures. So Lifetime Ventures has been around for, this is our 9th year. Invested in about 50 companies to date, the bulk majority of which is through OIST Lifetime Ventures Fund, which we launched 3 years ago in partnership with OIST. And we only lead at pre-seed to seed stage, mostly in deep tech for either health or climate applications. By leading the majority of our investments, the first touch point that we have with the companies or with the founders actually are pre-incorporation, so before the companies are started. And even after investing, we do quite a bit of hand-holding to make sure that the company is started. So the identity is a venture capital, but we at least aspire to operate a little bit closer to the venture studio model than a standalone VC. And the reason why we chose health and climate is, of course, Japan and the world share this issue in common. But philosophically, it actually comes from the observation that we made, which is that oftentimes, or sometimes, the software technology that we may have, or even smartphones, some of them may solve one problem, but may be creating another. And we may be stuck in this, or starting to be stuck in this problem-solution loop, where one solution then creates another problem. And we essentially wanted to get to the root cause of that by tackling the physical problem, which is, in our view, human health and planetary health. And at least that's what we aspire to do. So really resonated what you said earlier.
Great. Okay, let's jumpstart and start with the big picture. So we all believe in early stage collaboration, that's clear. Even then, we are still seeing a lot of silo happening. So what are the challenges you are still seeing in your own work? And what are the ways that we can break that through?
So, first I'll say a couple things that we've done to address this. Number one, we've made it very, very inexpensive to start projects. So, we started 130 projects in the last 2 years. We're starting 1 or 2 projects a week, mostly with partners. And the first amount of budget for a project is like thousands of dollars. And so that's a small enough number that we don't have to worry so much about getting started. And I think that naturally makes things more inclusive. And then the second thing is we built up the processes and systems in order to let many, many people participate part-time, which also, I think, improves collaboration. What still makes it very hard is that you don't have much information to go off of in the earliest stages. And so, you don't know if you're on the right track. And if you do things well, I think you're actually, killing most of the things that you start, and that can be demotivating for people. And so creating a culture that is more not just accepting but embracing of failure, aligning incentives. So one of the things we're working on now is how can we give more equity that's pooled to people who are working earlier in the kind of startup journey? Because if I'm asking you to, kill most of the things you're working on, that's harder to do if you don't have equity in lots of different things. And so I think thinking about the legal structures, the tax structures, navigating the complexity to, for example, pool incentives, and then making it culturally acceptable. Even in the US, it's not that culturally acceptable. And I think in other countries like Japan, it's even less culturally acceptable to fail most of the time. I think that's where a lot of the challenge is for early stage.
Yeah, and it's not just about failing, but also I think a lot of Japanese investors would ask the founders, are you full-time? Is your team full-time? How many of the team members are full-time?
Yeah.
Are
you in this for life?
Exactly.
Like I just started.
What are the reactions that you're getting from the people around you, the entrepreneurs, the team members, investors?
Well, before we started, so this is the 4th time that I've done an incubator, and when I told people about the basic approach, which is to delay the CEO, delay the full-time team until seed stage, after about $1 million has already been spent, this was the main thing people didn't believe. They were like, without the CEO, without one throat to choke, like you're not going to be able to get things to, to kind of like seed stage. And I was like, I don't think that's right. I think you can. Now that we've done it a half dozen times, it's easier for people to believe. But I think one of the things that was the most important was pooling our own money. So Offline Studio is 1/3 of the dollars from Offline Ventures. And so now we have more and more partners. We have a partner like Corundum that invests with us if projects are advancing. But we kind of had to start saying, you know what, we'll just spend our own money because it's too hard for an investor to think I'm investing in you, but there's no CEO, there's no team, it's just too weird. And so that was, I think, essential for us is to spend our own dollars, at least until we had enough success that now it wasn't such a stretch for other people to buy into the model.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah, my thought on siloing is largely around specialties in education. So we're trained to be specialists in something. So I'm a trained microbiologist. Microbiology really wasn't associated with health and disease beyond infectious disease until the past 20 years or so. So if I want to be a microbiome scientist and try and say help somebody with depression, which is our lead program going into humans this year, I inherently don't have the knowledge for depression. So I have to go and communicate with people who study depression. Now, if we also get into the world of big data and multi-omics and metabolomics and sequencing and computational biology and AI, most people who study depression don't know that, and most people who study microbiology don't know that. When you actually look at the figure, which was shown yesterday, on the experts of microbiome, the 3 best cited people in microbiome, none of them are microbiologists. So this actually gets to be challenging to solve big problems that require multiple specialties. So I'm a big believer in this notion of trying to open up conferences and communication with people in multiple domains that are open-minded, that these domains may actually blend together. And to give you one very interesting practical example, is I talked about the garden within us, right? The microbes are the plants, the food is the fertilizer. I went to a conference in New York City a couple weeks ago on metabolic psychiatry. This was using food to improve brain health. And wonderful conversations of diet data showing that this can improve health. There was a lovely talk on the evolution of diet and why this is important for us to remember what we used to eat and how this could be causal to some of the problems when it comes to the brain. There wasn't a single mention of microbes. They were also focused on the mitochondria. The mitochondria literally came from a bacteria. And so this is where I think there's a huge opportunity to bring together different schools of thought. Potentially AI will be the combiner of all of this, but it's been very hard to communicate the important things we need to solve microbiology and microbiome to other groups, some of which think they're now experts in microbiology and microbiome, even though they don't have the fundamental principles. So that's where just open, honest conversation, I think, is extremely important, especially in human health, where the reason you do it is to help the people in need, the patients.
And what do you think is stopping people from openly talking and collaborating?
I think most institutions are built in silos. You have departments, right? Most conferences are also built in silos. So there's microbiome conferences. And I used to go to a lot of them, but they'd all say the same stuff. And that was very comfortable. But going to, say, neuroscience conferences, it just gave me a totally different world of how people think. As we think about like venture capital, most scientists aren't trained in this either. And there's different models to potentially raise money to accomplish the goals that you seek. And we've had some great conversations in that domain too for things like crypto. I think just honestly, not enough people have the problems to rally around and then the forums to come together to brainstorm how they can work together to solve these things.
Thank you.
On silos, 3 points. The first is the alignment of financial incentives that Max briefly mentioned. So allowing institutions and researchers to have some financial exposure to the upside through in a form of stock option, royalties, etc. But that's quite standard. The second, in my view, is the alignment of intellectual incentives. So I do see that perhaps after a certain point or after a certain stage of a startup, the researchers or scientists who are initially involved in building the product, the commercialization requires less of that intellectual input and more of the business acumen. And that seems to make it very, for the lack of better words, boring for the builders. And I do believe we can actually design a venture in a way that the reaching the next commercial milestone can then reveal a new set of scientific challenges that then can spark the interest of the researchers and scientists. And this, in my view, can really align this intellectual curiosity and enterprise value. So I would love to see more of that. Third, perhaps most important or most fundamental, and I think a little bit of what Philip touched upon as well, is the alignment of beliefs. I do think that we do think and feel and act that are set according to different standards that are in different silos. but different silos have this, different kinds of collective beliefs. And the only way, in my view, is that we can break these silos is really just individual connections across silos. So nature obviously doesn't discriminate across different disciplines of science or across different disciplines, and I believe innovation shouldn't either. And I don't think this can come from a course on business to scientists or course on scientific management to business side, but really, since the industry academia gap, or any silo for that matter, is really a human construct anyways, in the end, we can really achieve this, breaking the barrier through belief osmosis, so where individuals interact with each other as humans, and through these connections, we can then perhaps break down the existing collective beliefs that we have in each silo, and perhaps recreate new, more collective, holistic belief together.
Can I add? Yeah, so something that has kind of puzzled me is the way that organizations often orient to mission. So I worked at Google, and I think Google had a really good mission, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Really inspiring as someone who worked at Google. I always thought it very strange that if there was another startup and they said that their mission was to organize the world's information and make it accessible and useful, they would get sued by Google for violating their intellectual property and trademarks. So I think that a mission for an organization actually should be above the organization. I think that's something that Japan actually does better, to think about the kind of cause or to think about the goal outside of the organization. And same thing for a person, right? I think that each person should have a mission or a set of goals, but I want to tie myself to a goal that lots of people share, right? And then that's a kind of belief. And then I think that there's some structures that have to go along with that. So one of them is around IP. I think it's still way too hard to navigate sharing of IP. And I think that a lot of kind of Web3 and AI and kind of post-cloud platforms can help address this. I think a lot of the people in the room can both contribute and benefit from IP being more easily shared across. And then I also think conferences are wonderful, and I brought this up before, but I've become a real believer in part-time opportunities. I think if I work full-time at one organization until I quit that organization and work full-time at another organization, really hard to collaborate, right? But if I work part-time on a bunch of things, much easier to work, in different, and so the studio that we built is set up around the idea of part-time. Most of the people working on projects work on many projects at once. And I think that will become more and more common. In fact, as full-time employment basically gets destroyed, which I think is kind of scary and comes with a lot of real negatives for people, especially people earlier in their career, that might be a silver lining, which is there are more and more opportunities and more demand for part-time opportunities and platforms that enable part-time, where if you want to work half-time, you should be able to get half pay. Most places don't provide that. If you want to work a quarter time, you should be able to get at least quarter pay, if not more, right? And so I think we might see a shift to more of that.
Yeah, I think we are also exploring that model at our firm, but I have to ask Phil or Koshu, for someone who's been in one industry or one passion for such a long time, wouldn't it be hard to think about part-time jobs and having multiple jobs to pursue something that might click in the future?
Yeah, I think there's probably a structure to do it. There's job, there's project, there's roles, right? So most startups, everybody's wearing a lot of hats already. So you're sort of part-time in different things, right? So it's just a matter of how do you create a unified structure and the incentive structures around it too, where that could be celebrated. Because I do think there's people that are just so efficient that they can do their job probably 5 times and have higher impact. And this is already happening in the C-suite. So fractional CFO, fractional COO, CBO, Like a number of folks have gravitated towards that. And I think the overall efficiency of doing that for multiple entities or projects is higher than probably a single project. So I think conceptually I like it a lot. The challenge is just this isn't a structure yet that's been appreciated by the venture community and in business schools. But there's ways to model this out and I think pilot these experiments well. You could think the same of like a startup, where if you have a startup with like a platform and a team, and you can do 100 things with the platform, and that could help 100 different patient populations much more efficiently than creating 100 individual companies that try to recreate the platform. Like we should come up with a structure to do this, right? And there's ways that we can automate a lot of it with AI and different components to be more efficient than we ever could when those business books were written. So I would love to brainstorm on that. And maybe the answer is just those AI agents that we saw in the last talk.
Sorry, I have extreme personality to, I think, not be able to work on part-time. But actually, I think that thought was for the better.
But I would say, as a venture capitalist, you almost have to be part-time across all the different portfolios.
So actually, it's more that perception of identity, and I think the obsession with the occupational identity that I have. But as you guys said, like we already do part-time different company involvement, different roles. I don't think it's different in academia either, with a professor working with different professors on different publications within different disciplines. So I'll have to sleep on this myself. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and also coming back to the patent and licensing issues, that how it should be shared, but I think it's a difficult thing for someone who's been working on it and has just gotten patented to share openly. One of my portfolio companies currently in a dispute over patents. So how do you think about balancing protecting the patent and protecting something that you've worked for and for the future profit to sharing and collaborating with partners to make better things happen?
I mean, I think there are different models around what you can do with IP. So there are some interesting models where people pool patents, and that has both the ability to get kind of the value of the whole pool that I'm part of, the way that I would have to be, for example, a much bigger company, and also more patent protection. Because now you have lots of patents and it's harder for someone to work around your patent when you have 1,000 related patents. So I've seen platforms that let early stage organizations actually function more like large companies from an IP perspective. Another area that I'm really interested in is AI, IP protection and licensing. So the easiest way that I think about what AI can do nowadays, and actually this leaves out a whole bunch of new things AI can do, but is just, hey, what if I had a way above average person working on this for free? What could I do? So if I have a way above average IP attorney, and a way above average IP litigator, and a way above average licenser, if I have the whole OIST technology transfer team for free, working on my little startup 24/7, what could I do? And I think you can do a lot more things and a lot more complex things. And really try and align incentives. So one of the things that I think is a problem with current IP licensing is, there's only so many levers and you agree up front and then things change and how do you monitor it? But I think that AI and more things being digitized has the potential to basically almost say, as crazy as it sounds, I'll give it kind of sci-fi future, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to get paid. I don't know what you're going to get paid. But there's going to be an AI that's fair that'll figure it out. And you know what? I trust the AI. You trust the AI. It's like a mediator. How much more could get done if we didn't have to worry about doing things up front, if we could just trust that after the fact, when the dust settles, things would be fair? I think that will be more and more possible.
I have great ideas. And what I will say is that it's pretty miserable if you've ever negotiated with the tech transfer office. I've cried twice.
Not this one.
Yeah, not that one. But I've cried twice since starting Holobiome. One of those times has been negotiating with the University of California Tech Transfer office. It's just not efficient at the end of the day. Also, creating IP is changing with AI. One of my friends made a company by the name of IP Torch. You literally write in a paragraph on your summary, on your patent idea, you click a button, it does a freedom to operate. You click another button, and it drafts claims around those patents. So the world's changing when it comes to inventions, absolutely. And I think there's creative ways to have structures where at the end of the day, this could be faster. We can check the box for investors, and then just move on to innovating to helping people. And the tools should be here, and it's just a conversation of the right incentives.
Thank you. Yep. Okay. Talked a lot about platforms and different models, and you might all have different biases. But so we have a whole range of platforms and models: venture studios, platforms, hybrids, VCs. What do you think works the best in creating early stage innovation? And this all claim to reduce friction, but what have you seen work and not work in your own work and around you?
In my view, since this is an ecosystem that obviously starts from the scientists, researchers, all the way down to the end user, I mean, obviously through commercialization brought to the market, I actually don't think there is a single model that works for every case and for every invention to then convert it into innovation. So just like, I guess, microbiome, that there's probably no single one that could drastically improve all the health conditions of a human. There should be models for different ones. Having said that, being a VC myself, I do wonder, and I probably shouldn't be saying this as a VC, I do wonder whether this traditional, you start all full-time co-founders, then VC investing, and you have subsequent rounds, etc. 10-year fund term, perhaps 2-year extension. I don't know how long this would continue, precisely for that AI disruption. Either shortening that term to that time period or time frame to then exit, or actually might even make it longer to remain in private, just because there are different liquidity or different ways for founders or employees to then financially get compensated for. So I'm actually so. Long story short, I don't think VC is it. I do hope that VC should play still a role in this ecosystem, but I just genuinely wish this is going to be more diversified.
Yeah, my answer to the question of what's best is who are you serving? So if it's the patients, I think the way to serve the patients best is to be able to test hypotheses as quickly as you can and get it to them as fast as you can to close the iteration cycle. I think if it's best for venture, in biotech, there's some very creative financial engineers that went public with preclinical data, made a lot of money. So they had a 50x, 100x return. It's great for them. It's not great for patients. It created a bubble which totally destroyed the industry for a little while of raising capital. When it comes to the individual, the scientists, the teams, I don't think the model which I described earlier, if you're in biotech, of create a platform, find an asset, fire the R&D team that was working so beautifully together, sometimes the best people in the world, is good for them. So it's a bit of like, what are you pursuing? Like if it's the financial interest, sure, there's a model to do it. But if it's to try to improve human health, make people happier, like I don't think we've nailed the model yet, which is why I think it's so important to have these conversations today.
No?
We can move on.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And actually, now that we touched upon the financial models, have you seen any creative financial models or structures or partnerships that made the venture boom and that you were wowed by the creativity of these structural partnerships?
I could talk about that for a long time.
Okay.
I like financial engineering. So I'll tell you one that I've been very inspired by, which is the way that Warburg Pincus or other late-stage private equity funds do very risky, like oil and gas R&D, where what they do is they fund, and pharma I think does some similar things. They fund milestones, but they don't value along the way. They wait to ultimately see how much the project is valued at the end, and then they basically look backwards and they say, okay, for a project that performed like this, 80th percentile versus 30th percentile, how much of that share is fair to go to the capital versus to go to the labor versus to go to the technology? And so they retroactively price, but they unlock capital based off of milestones. So I'm inspired by that. I think the idea of trying to price along the way, particularly when, for example, there's a public market and suddenly I dump all my shares to someone else who owns it and now I'm out and those shares are valued based off of 40-year cash flows, I don't think that makes a ton of sense. And so I think more things that let you retroactively price are very interesting. And as we shift to kind of intelligent, automated systems, especially ones that are hard to game, I think that's interesting. I also think Web3 is very interesting. I think that crypto specifically and some DeFi platforms really allow you to see many different versions of money. And so the idea that if I have a certain type of problem with a certain type of value that get created, I can create a solution for that that is so aligned with that I'm actually starting to explore, well, how should the money function? Not just the financial incentives. And so all of this stuff I think is very complex. And I think we're entering an era where a lot of that complexity can be managed. So I look at something like Adapar, which is the tool for family offices that runs on AI that's made by the Palantir founders. What it's doing is fantastically complex under the hood. But even for the wealth manager, it's actually fairly simple. And for the client, what they see is very, very simple, right? And so I think systems that are complex under the hood, but then that manage that complexity, I think that there's real opportunity there.
And how do you make that complex into simplicity? Because I think some of the challenges is with working with scientists and designers and people who are not in the business industry is to explain the value of that financial upsides and the complexity of behind the scene. I hear what you're saying, but how does that actually work in life?
Well, I think practically I can bring up at least two things. One is to be able to talk to it in natural language.
Okay.
Right? That's interesting. We can now create a chatbot that knows you, that speaks to you in the way that you're speaking to it, and it can translate in some sense from whatever it might say to someone else to whatever it would say to you.
Yep.
And then second, I think we're increasingly going to see dynamic UI, where the idea that I build a user interface and everybody uses that user interface, and now I come out with the next version of that interface and everyone uses the next version, I don't think that's what it's going to be like in 5 years, 10 years. I think that these AI systems are going to be able on the fly to create an interface that will show you in pictures or graphs, and you'll be able to say, well, what would that be like, if I took out half my money now? And it'll say, okay, well, let me show you. I remember when my kids were little, there was an iPad app that would teach them physics, but they could manipulate the thing. So they could drop the ball and they could increase gravity and decrease gravity, and you could see like what happens when and so I can teach much more complicated topics by letting you manipulate and letting you see what changes. So I think the ability to help people understand, given who they are and what's the situation, I think that we're in the very early days of where these technologies can go.
So with the AI, we are right at the timing for this to make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think being able to think about, well, new financial structures are possible because the way to explain the financial structure is different now.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of integrated approach that will allow us to make bigger leaps as we ask these fundamental questions, about like, how do we solve big problems? How do we improve collaboration? How do we let people participate who normally wouldn't get these kind of incentives because they wouldn't know how to navigate these kind of complexities?
Yeah, 100%. Anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, one model I like a lot in biotech is the hub and spoke model, which actually covers quite a bit of like what I talked about, building a platform, being able to spin out subsidiaries to use the platform and really get that subsidiary moving quickly with a smaller amount of capital to test a hypothesis. So that concept of platform spin outs, creative ways of funding these could be with foundations, corporate partners, venture that's focused on a specific problem. So there's many different ways to think about tapping into unique financial capital. But then what I like even more about that is there's a point where you can start to model out return based on probability of success. Where now, if you have the right team, you have a certain amount of money to test a hypothesis, and there's a certain probability a hypothesis works out, you can start approaching groups that look at risk a little differently and don't necessarily need the same return, specifically private equity. So this has been done already in multiple companies in biopharma. So BridgeBio, Roivant, Nimbus, these are all groups that have done it. But what was interesting there was the math to do that in biotech, if you have a platform for something like gene therapy, was around $30 billion. And that was purely because the amount of money that would go in to take enough shots to enable you to have a moonshot with a 10 to 12% return. Where I think things get really interesting is if your amount of capital to get proof of concept or to have a product or to spin a company that could be revenue generation is much smaller, which is where the world of AI is certainly bringing us to at this point. Now we could think about some of these big moonshot health problems with actually not a ton of money. And you can think about also pointing these platforms when you talk about biotech, not only at pharma, but also places like wellness and food and personalization. So that's something that I think we need a little bit more experimentation for, but all the tools are here.
Financial instruments, one instrument that I've come across that I really like is a convertible grant. So an organization, usually government-related or NGO, provides grant, and should the startup go to the subsequent fundraising, then that converts at set. But if they don't, then you don't get. Now, the second instrument that I really like is DeSci, or the decentralized finance, but for scientific projects. So for instance, for longevity-related research, Ventilla is a relatively known one. One problem I have with that right now is that it tends to still be financially driven. Sounds very ironic for a financial VC to be saying this, but and when the participants of the DAO or of the platform are interested in the financial incentives, of course they are interested in longevity, but of course the type of research that is funded by Ventilla tends to be more drug discovery related and not others that could obviously have tremendous amount of impact. And I think that sort of second way of DeSci, I hope, is going to be more community driven, where, the internet has unlocked this ability to connect with the people on different parts of you, different parts of your identity or interests or beliefs. And I feel like we still haven't made the most out of it. So I do hope that a community-driven, very much aligned on the mission, that could then go beyond to the financial incentive, but powered or financed by DeSci is something I'm looking forward to.
We're working on a project that's
Great.
DeSci.
We should talk.
Great. I think we're nearing the end of the time, so last question. But we've talked a lot about rapid prototyping and testing and changing. What does just enough look like in your own work and specifically in biohealth?
I mean, just enough is people living happier and healthier lives. So, like, if you contributed to that, like, that's great. And then, there's semantics of how to measure that. But, yeah, that's what we should shoot for.
Just enough of what?
Sorry, I meant just enough in terms of like testing and
Like what's the minimum in
yeah,
MVP?
minimum MVP, yeah,
Oh.
testing. Sorry.
I'll change my
That's
answer.
what I thought. That's what I thought. Too. I was like, I'm gonna let Koshu answer so that I can triangulate from his answer.
Sorry, the question wasn't enough.
This drives me crazy, by the way. Real quick. So, like, you ask 20 people, they have different opinions. So you talk to pharma, what is, like, validated? Some people, the in vitro study, the in vivo study, the 20-person clinical trial, the 500-person clinical trial, the N of 1 experiment.
Yeah, so I come from more of a software background, and people talk about minimum viable magic, not minimum viable product, and what makes enough people, let's say most people, want to use it more the second time than they wanted the first time, and more the third time than they wanted the second time. I think if you're seeing that happen, then I think you've got something. And I think the best route to make that happen is actually to do less and to start with something that the people around the table like really feel for, right? You're really kind of solving your own problem, and then you're working with a narrow subset of people that less can really do what they need most. And that's when you know you have something that works.
I did understand your question, but I think I'll actually answer kind of similar to Philip.
But you liked his answer better.
Yeah, really liked it. Because I do have this sort of recurrent thought or question to myself, especially operating in an industry full of very high agency, high action-driven people, which is how do we balance being ambitious so that we can actually have a better future, but also be happy today? And sorry to actually answer the question with the question, but or the phrase of the question itself, but it might actually be just enough, at least to have that understanding that we should continue to act towards a better future, but at least today, obviously we cannot change the present, we can't change the past that has brought us to the present. So at least for today, maybe this panel as well, but today, what we have today, maybe just enough.
Great conclusion, just enough. Yeah. Thank you for the wonderful, rich discussions. I think we understand with the right intention, right structure, and open conversations and collaborations, we can definitely aim for the bright future together. And thank you, audience, for listening to our panel.
Thank you so much for the panel discussions. I think some minds in this room were probably changed. You get about 10 minutes to discuss this over coffee break, when we will return with a short talk followed by a panel on topics of neuroplasticity, neurointelligence, and how this changes the human potential going forward. See you in 10 minutes.